My name is Lucas Batista Espíndola. I'm a student here at King's College International Foundation Program. And today I'm discussing in this presentation whether the British Empire has truly beneficiated its colonies economically. Previous and current discussion about the British Empire have always questioned whether the empire was a force for good or not, with some side of the discussion arguing it was a benign commercial nation, while others consider the British Empire an overall negative phenomenon. Still, for the purpose of this presentation, only the economic aspects will be taken into consideration, due to two reasons. Firstly, because of the short time available for it, and secondly, because the British Empire economic implications affected not only the financial aspect, but also ethically and culturally as well. In this presentation, I will start firstly by giving an overall analysis of some of the general aspects of the empire, starting by giving a brief background information, the British Empire relation with its overall investments, the colonial practices, and the economic consequences of the slavery. To later proceed to the second part of my presentation, which is a case study of one of the most and one of the least successful British colonies, by taking an example of Hong Kong and Sudan. I will later conclude that the British Empire, even though it has some overall good accomplishments in the economic field, it was majorly in some colonies a negative phenomenon. If you have any questions, I must ask you to wait until the end of this presentation, where there will be appropriate time for me to answer all of them. Firstly, I would like to start with the brief background information. According to Hidden 1949, after the Napoleonic Wars, Europe was in a period of economic depression, which waves of significant unemployment spread throughout the continent. While the fellow states in Europe decided to close down their economies and impose severe taxations upon their colonies, Britain adopted a different approach, which made it stand out from Europe. Britain decided to adopt open market policies by increasing its industrial production, its naval trade, and also minimizing its exchange tariffs to its colonies. This lack of protectionism not only allowed Britain to flourish economically, but also set major standards of global free trade policies in its colonies. To illustrate such phenomenon, Crawford, 1991, conducted a historical analysis which demonstrates that Britain managed to keep, by the middle of 20th century, its rates towards imported products between 0 to 5%, while Russia, France, and Germany rates were approximately 8, 5, 20, and 13%. Hence, it can be said that the empire has a consequently positive impact in its colonies, since it optimized colonial trade and promote more dynamic markets. FATS 1995 states that this phenomenon can be seen, especially when we analyze some of the circumstances of current countries which were previously British colonies, such as Australia, New Zealand, and Hong Kong, that now possesses promising GDP growth and high economic influence rates. Similarly, the British Empire also constructively contributed to unprecedented major overseas investments. According to Cooper and Madison, 2001, it is suggested that Britain was, by the middle of the 20th century, the world's main capital exporter, investing mainly into Africa and Asia rudimentary economies. By taking financial risks into overseas investments in distant lands, the British government fostered technological advancement in agriculture and infrastructure improvements, such as railroads, telegraph lines, and shipping ports. Additionally, studies made by Kenyon Hopkins in 1993 suggest that British Empire was responsible in India for introducing a better postal communication lines and also legal structure for commercial law. It's also suggested that financial aid that I just mentioned were not exclusively to British colonies, but also to countries which were indirectly under its influence, such as Brazil and Uruguay, which also allowed the British colonies to increase and broaden their international trades. After analyzing some of the positive aspects, we can now proceed to the next part of the presentation, and discuss why the imperial period should not be boldly linked to economic global welfare. While it is true the British Empire assisted in the development of its colonies, which indeed made them profitable, it can be said that their motives were almost driven exclusively to British metropolitan interests, aiming to make Britain the most powerful country in the world. Disregarding the well-being of its colonies' inhabitants and their individual economies. Hayem 2010 claimed the empire expansion was compelled through manufacturers, monopolization, and plantation practices, with little or no concern at all in maintaining traditional diverse production that could be sustained by the inhabitants of the British colonies. As a consequence, all those mentioned factors were used to maximize British profits, since the economic subsidies offered by the empire were used to improve the British Empire and to lower the exchange rate tariffs of its colonies, which left millions of countries impoverished. On a similar stance, it's important to highlight the British controversial contribution to slavery and the consequent economic implications. The historical analysis conducted by ILF 1995 states that by the middle of the 19th century, Britain was responsible for trading over 30,000 slaves annually towards tobacco, rubber, silk cultures in the Americas. Still, it's important to recognize that the British had a positive impact as well, since it was one of the first countries in the world to abolish slavery. And as a consequence, one may say it was good economically for its colonies, since Britain promoted paid labor across the world. However, some of the reasons behind abolition should nevertheless be neglected. As some scholars suggest, by the middle of the 19th century, slave trading was becoming speculative and risky, and there was an increasing need to expand the economic markets because there was a limit on how much Europe could buy British products. And therefore, the British government was increasingly compelled to search for a new solution to their economic problems, which was abolishing slavery. By abolishing slavery, the British Empire obtained a new exclusive consumer market, since all their colonies were forced to trade primarily with Britain, and at really low prices. Hence, the empire was able to sustain its hierarchical structure of dominance, but this time through the loss of user capitalism, which increased British profits while decreasing the economic independence of its colonies. After analyzing some of the general economic aspects of the British Empire, we can now proceed to the second part of this presentation, which is a case study of one of the least successful British colonies. I would like to start firstly by taking Hong Kong as an example of a successful British colony. Hong Kong can be characterized